Have you been thinking about podcast guesting, but feeling overwhelmed about where to start? Or maybe you've been a guest on a few shows, but you aren't seeing the results that you hoped for. I'm Shauna Rodriguez, host of Authentically Amplified and podcast strategist, helping purpose-driven solopreneurs connect to their ideal clients through podcasting. I've got 2 full episodes on podcast guesting, but to make things easy, let me break down just one strategy for you. And the 4th strategy is a content cascade strategy. So something that 90% of podcast guests completely miss is how to really use one interview and to be multiple pieces of content and really have it benefit their whole marketing strategy, all of the work they're doing. So they're either being on so many that they just kind of like blur through them, right? Or they don't recognize what this opportunity is. One podcast episode is a goldmine, whether you have a podcast or you guest on them. So you can take that one podcast episode and not just share the link. Sharing the link is a good place to start, but you can take that and intentionally create more from it. And a really powerful way to do that is to have quote moments. So if you've noticed during this episode, if you're listening to the full episode, I use things like content cascade strategy, right? And then explain what that is. That creates quote moments. That creates something that I can pull out and just use as one part of this conversation around content cascade strategy. So if you have things you create that are nuggets that you're dropping inside the podcast episodes when you go on them, because you have these quote moments, then you can build a separate reel that you make and talk about. So if you tune into Authenticity Amplified that I was on with Shauna Rodriguez, we talk about content cascade strategy. Do you wonder what that is? You're going to get so much more of the whole episode, but I'll give you a hint. It's about how you can use the content from one podcast episode to populate your content, your marketing strategy for an entire month from one podcast episode. There is so much gold in there. We talk about it more, so check out the full episode. But you can use one podcast episode to take care of your Instagram reels, to fill your blog posts, whatever you need for content, you can get from one podcast episode. Check it out. And so by having like content cascade strategy, right? We'll talk about our next strategy, the rapid authority accelerator, right? If you come up with these like buzz terms, quote moments, build these pieces around it, you can take those pieces out and then use them. So it's valuable to, when you speak, to practice having like the value first prep method that I mentioned. And you say the value first prep method and you give a description of it. So you have an easy pull-outable quote that you can use, that you can just like write up as a carousel for you to put on Instagram if you wanted to, for you to make a blog post to elaborate on. There's so many things that you can do with it, right? So if you are intentional about what you go into the podcast talking about, you're able to then take that out and utilize it for your content cascade strategy to utilize in multiple ways. So you just need to be mindful and intentional about it. And that's why sometimes it's better to like slowly build up the podcast that you're on so that you can practice utilizing that and get the most out of each podcast guesting opportunity and then build up your momentum elsewhere. That was pretty helpful, right? Do you want more? There's 4 on the full episode. 5 advanced strategies for being a podcast guest. Or you can simply check out the next one. It's right there. All 5. Just one more. And I've got a tip sheet below that will give you different strategies to be on the show. I've got your back. Podcast guesting is what you want to be checking out.